when it comes to consoles, the news keeps getting worse. We knew it was going to be tough to get a next generation console, but in previous generations, about 6 months or so after release, that constraint started to relax and it became easier to get consoles. But because of everything that's been going on in the world and the severe restraint on silicon chips, Sony is now saying that, hey, getting a PlayStation 5 is going to be pretty tough. Actually, they came out and said today it might be not until the end of 2022. Yes, not the end of 2021, but the end of 2022 when you might be able to readily available, just walk into a store and grab a PlayStation 5. That is significant on multiple fronts. One, that's about 18 months away from just casual availability. Now, we also know that Microsoft is also feeling the constraint on both the Series X and the Series S. Now, this doesn't mean that consoles aren't becoming available. We already know that they show up. I try to tweet out when I hear that GameStop or Walmart is going to be getting one, but the quantity is just not there. It's not filling demand. Actually, Sony has come out and said that they've sold more than 8 million consoles since release, which is pretty healthy and actually outstripping PlayStation 4 sales. And so by all accounts, there's a lot of people who want to go from the PlayStation 4, which sold over 100 million units, to the PlayStation 5, and that's why they're being sold out so quick. Now, we don't have exact figures on the Xbox side. Microsoft has been holding those numbers close to the chest, but we know that it is more than likely less than 8 million, because if it was more than 8 million, Microsoft would be screaming that from every single building in your general vicinity, but that's not happening. And we also know that Microsoft got started producing their consoles later than the PlayStation. But this is, generally speaking, just bad news for gamers. Now, if you're still trying to buy a GPU, you're also out of luck. So you've really just got to be, it almost comes down to luck or like paying in for sniping tools if you want to be able to grab these consoles, which means that if you see one available online and you want it, you better buy it right away, because scalpers are still buying these things and they're still selling for inflated pricing, which is, generally speaking, just not good for the industry. Now, I have heard from partners, not directly from Microsoft, about Xbox supply, and the constraints continue to be a problem for just about every single vendor or retailer that I've talked to, and I would not expect those to relax anytime soon. Microsoft had originally predicted, if you remember, that they thought it would be about the summertime that they thought these constraints would lift. But I suspect that Microsoft might eventually come out and say, hey, we think it might be a little bit longer than that, primarily because the constraints around chip supply and shortages has not relaxed at all. If anything, they've gotten significantly worse based on what I've heard from different venues and vendors and retailers and everything else out in the ecosystem. So it's not good news if you're a gamer, because you can't go out and buy a next generation or current generation 3000 series GPU if you really want. You can't really buy an AMD one if you want. You can't really buy a PlayStation 5 if you want. Can't really buy an Xbox Series X or S if you want. It's all very hard to get a hold of these supplies, which means that if you happen to see one, you better start buying quickly. So that is sort of the bad news. Now, hopefully these companies will eventually start getting more chips, but it's not, I can guarantee you, if these companies could get more consoles onto store shelves, they absolutely would, because they are selling instantly. So there's definitely demand is outstripping supply, but still by a significant margin this many months after launch. Remember, they launched late last year, late last year, we'll just go with that. And we still can't readily just walk into a Best Buy or a GameStop or anywhere else and find these devices. So I wish that there was better news, that the supply was starting to relax and that we had good news on the horizon, but at least for now, it's going to be a tough sort of next-gen launch. While these companies will more than likely sell everything they can get out the door, the likelihood is that they could potentially get more sold if they could get the units produced. Something more interesting to think about is if you're a game developer. And let's say you started, 24 months ago building a pure next-gen title, meaning we'll use PlayStation as an example. PlayStation 5, you're building an exclusive PlayStation 5 title. Now, granted, Sony probably gave you some money up front, but you're expecting X amount of sales from that console generation because you're not building for the PlayStation 4 because you're assuming that there's going to be a built-in install base. Well, based on what we're seeing in the market today, that next generation install base may be significantly lower than what initial expectations would have suggested based on the constraints in the market. You could make the exact same argument too on the Xbox side. If you're building a Series X and S exclusive or just non-cross-generational, meaning it doesn't work on the Xbox One, it could be the exact same argument that's like, hey, you were expecting expecting there to be X amount of consoles out in the retail world, when the reality it's a fraction of that because of the constraints that are happening within the industry, which really shakes things up if you think about it from a game developer perspective. There's a couple different options. Do you delay your game intentionally? Well, there's contract ramifications, especially if you're a third party. It says you were going to deliver X title on Y timeline. Well, if you're breaking that, then there's other issues that you're going to have to deal with. But at the same time, if you need additional sales and the consoles just quite physically aren't in existence, that is a tough pill to swallow, because remember, we already know how difficult it is not only just to build a game and ship it on time, and with delays in the industry, especially the most recent years, past couple years I should say, become very common, right? Everybody working remotely, those things became quite difficult. And so just getting a game out is a challenge on itself. And then not having the install base to potentially sell to makes it an even harder challenge to just maintain some sanity at the end of the day. So yes, it really stinks that there's not enough supply out there. And I get angry DMs all the time that people miss, next generation console availability. The other thing to consider too is, typically speaking, in a console launch generation, the first price cut comes about a year after release. Sometimes somewhere in like the $25 to $50 range, a price cut isn't unexpected after the console's been available for a year. I'm not so sure we're going to potentially see that. I mean, imagine, especially on the PlayStation 5, why would they cut pricing if they don't expect console availability to relax for potentially another year after this upcoming holiday season? So I'm not expecting that to happen. And then you look at the Microsoft side, who is obviously trying to outsell Sony, but that's going to be a very difficult task. Why would they cut pricing? Again, they're already outselling. They already have a lower price box, but they don't have devices on shelves to actually sell. So it's becoming a very interesting shift in how we typically look at a console generation launch, because all of the norms are just thrown out. We've never seen supply constraints like we see right now. We've never seen next gen challenges like we have seen right now. And then pricing in itself is a completely different challenge and has its own sort of modeling, where Microsoft expects Sony to do one thing and then they can react or try to preemptively make a move before they do. And so you take your normal convention, you throw it up into the air, and now all we have is just a confetti of sadness, because nobody can go out and buy a console or a GPU if they really want to play next generation games. So be on the lookout to see if Microsoft comes in sort of on a fast follow onto Sony about saying their availability. I'm not quite sure that they will, or if they will update anything other than saying, hey, we're still expecting maybe this summer, but I don't know. I don't think the signs look exceptionally good that Microsoft is going to have just a big bulk order coming this summer. Now, it is technically possible that they could be getting a huge shipment here sometime in the summer, but I strongly suspect that demand is going to continue to outstrip supply for both manufacturers. So I'm not trying to be like, hey, go out and buy the console as soon as you see it, but like if you see one available, there's a good chance that it will be gone in the very near future. So I don't know. It's just not great news across the entire board when it comes to supply constraints for both consoles, for PC gaming, and many other sectors. So that's about all we got for now, guys. But if you guys want to keep updated on everything else that is happening in the industry and all that, make sure to keep it subscribed here, because the only BS on this channel is me.